Hey, want to know the secret to playing the diatonic scale all across the neck? Well, just like the pentatonic scales, it's going to be modes. Kind of. Let me show you what I mean. So if you've seen my previous videos, or you know how to play the major and minor diatonic scale, including how to put them together so that they have all the same notes, then you know you can put different scale shapes together to keep playing the same key all across the neck. And if you've seen my videos on the pentatonic modes, then you know that there are only 3 other scale shapes, other than major and minor, that map out an entire key all across the fretboard. And what we do with our pentatonic scales, we also want to do with our diatonic scales. So it's time to look at the Dorian, Phrygian, and Mixolydian modes of the diatonic scale. And just as a reminder, we're really using the names of these modes just to name the scale shapes. It doesn't mean that we're playing in that mode as if it were its own key. Some music really is modal, but most of the time we'll really be using these scale shapes to extend major and minor keys up the fretboard. And we're simply using these names because it makes the shapes easy to remember, and because we will be starting on the associated notes on the low E string. So for example, the Dorian mode is the name of the scale that you get when you start on the second note of the major scale. And in that shape, we're starting on the second note down on the low E string, which is why I like to call it that. And if we were to really treat this note as the root, we would be in a Dorian harmony, but that doesn't happen that often. For now, we'll simply be using the scale shape the same way we did the relative major and minor scales, to expand the number of notes we have access to in a particular key, which will usually be a major or minor key. The bonus is when you do get around to playing in a modal harmony, then you'll know the scale shapes already. So without further ado, let's look at our Dorian scale shape. The first thing you might notice, similar to the pentatonic version, is that it has some slight position shifts within it. But nevertheless, we can still put our hand in position and focus on the finger combination to help memorize the shape. So going from the low E string, it starts on the first finger, which I'm going to put on the 5th fret. And it starts with a 1-3-4 finger combination. And then just 1 and 3 on the next string. And then here I've got to shift down by a fret, and I have 1, 2, 4 on the next 2 strings. And then I've got to shift back, and it's just 1, 3, 4 on the last 2 strings. And of course, I've got to reverse it to go back down. 4, 3, 1 on the first 2. My slight shift down, and 4, 2, 1 on the next 2 strings. Shifting back up by a fret, and 3, 1. And 4, 3, 1 on the low E string again. And of course, once you've got that under your fingers, we have to look at how it combines with the major diatonic scale, since we'll want to be able to shift back and forth between them. And having a look at this layout and looking for spots to shift on our first finger, we can see that the D and G string are probably the best spots. After that, we could switch up on our 4th finger on the A string, but are probably going to avoid the rest of the strings for now. Let me show you the shift on the G string first. I'll start my major diatonic scale down on the 3rd fret to give myself some room to move up. Once I get here, I bring my first finger up by 2 frets, and I'm into the Dorian diatonic shape. And I can go back down in the same place. Shifting down by 2 frets, and back into the major. And I can do the exact same thing on the D string. Shifting up by 2 frets, and I'm into the Dorian. And going back down in the same place. Down by 2 frets, back into the major. So these shifts can be a little bit tricky since we are shifting into the Dorian scale right in the middle, and because the Dorian scale has some slight shifts within it as well. So it's a good idea to really get to know that Dorian shape before combining it with the major. And there's another shift I can do on the A string by bringing my fourth finger up. Let me show you what that one looks like as well. Once I get here, I can bring my fourth finger up by 2 frets, and I'm into the Dorian. Even though I wouldn't usually play this note with my fourth finger, I'm in the shifted down position, which allows me to continue going up the scale. And I can go down in the same place. Once I get here, I shift down by 2 frets, and I'm back into the major. That one is a bit of a second choice since it uses different fingers than we would usually play when we're playing the Dorian on its own. And of course you want to be able to switch back and forth in different places, going up on one string and down on another, and really getting a feel for these two scale shapes as one big set of notes, since that's what they really are, laying out all one key. And next up, we have to do the same thing with the Phrygian scale. So this one's going to be a bit easier since it doesn't have any of those little shifts in it, but we also want to start looking out for some of those same finger combinations we saw in the other scale shapes, especially 1-2-4 and 1-3-4. So this one also starts on the first finger, which I'm going to put at the 5th fret, and once I'm in position, I can see I start off with a 1-2-4 finger combination. And then 1-3-4 on the next 2 strings. And then 1-3 on the next string. And then 1-2-4 again on the last 2. And of course, I reverse it to go back down, starting with 4-2-1 on the first 2 strings. 3-1 on the next string. 4-3-1 on the next 2 strings. And 4-2-1 on the low E string. And of course, once we've got that under our fingers, we've got to look at combining this Phrygian scale with the Dorian scale that we looked at earlier. And once we lay them out together so that they're in the same key, we can see that it's really just the D and G string that we will have a hard time shifting up on, since in the Dorian scale, it's shifted down by a fret. So to start going through these shifts, I'm going to put my Dorian scale down on the 3rd fret, and start by shifting up on the high E string. So here I can bring my first finger up by 2 frets, and I'm in the Phrygian Diatonic scale. And of course what's on the high E string is also on the low E string, so if I go back down by 2 frets, I'm back in the Dorian. And I can do just about the same thing on the B string. Bring my first finger up by 2 frets, and I'm back in the Phrygian. And I can go back down in the same place, bringing my first finger down by 2 frets, and I'm back in the Dorian scale. And that just leaves us with the A string, where I can again shift up on my first finger. Bringing it up by 2 frets, and I'm in the Phrygian. And I can go back down in the same place. Back down by 2 frets, and I'm back in the Dorian. And last but not least, there is the Mixolydian scale, which, if we look closely, does have a slight position shift over on the B string. The other thing to notice about this scale is that it's going to start on our 2nd finger, kind of more like the major scale. And I'm going to put my 2nd finger on the 5th fret again. So, starting on the low E string, I have a 2-4 finger combination, and then a 1-2-4 on the next 2 strings. and then 1, 3, 4 on the next string. Here's my slight shift up by 1 fret, and then another 1, 3, 4 finger combination. And then 1 and 3 on the high E string. And reversing it to go back down, I've got 3, 1 on the high E string, 4, 3, 1 on the next string, shifting down by a fret, and then another 4, 3, 1 finger combination, 4, 2, 1 on the next two strings, and then 4, 2 on the low E string. And again, once that scale shape is memorized, we have to look at how to shift between the Phrygian diatonic and this Mixolydian diatonic. And if you remember from looking at the pentatonic modes, when we get to the Mixolydian scale, we've really looped all the way around, and the one that comes after a Mixolydian is going to be the minor again. This means not only do we have to look at going from the Phrygian to Mixolydian scales, but from the Mixolydian back to the minor as well. So if we look at the Phrygian to Mixolydian first, we'll notice that it's really just the A, D, and G strings that give us good places to shift. So I'll put my Phrygian scale down on the 3rd fret and look at that A string shift first. Shifting up by 2 frets, and I'm into the Mixolydian. And back down in the same place. Back down by 2 frets, back into the Phrygian. And I've got the same thing on the D string. Up by 2 frets, and I'm in the Mixolydian. And back down in the same place again. Back down by 2 frets, and back in the Phrygian. And last but not least, on the G string. Up by 2 frets again, into the Mixolydian. And back down in the same place once more. Down by 2 frets, back into the Phrygian. So now all that's left is looking at the combination of the Mixolydian and minor scales. And if we look at the way that they're laid out on the fretboard, we can see that it's really the G, B, and high E strings that are the best places to switch. So again, I'm going to start my Mixolydian scale with my 2nd finger on the 3rd fret, and I'll do the shift on the high E string first. Bringing my 1st finger up by 2 frets, and I'm into the minor diatonic scale. Now usually what's on the high E string is also on the low E string, but because in the Mixolydian scale we play them in slightly different positions, if I were to shift down on the low E string, it wouldn't really put me back into the same position that I started the Mixolydian scale in. So for now, I'm just going to shift back down on the high E string again. Bringing my 1st finger down by 2 frets, and going back into the Mixolydian. And next up, let's try the shift on the B string. Shifting up by 2 frets, and I'm in the minor diatonic scale. And I can go back down in the same place. Shifting back down by 2 frets, and I'm in my Mixolydian scale again. And last but not least, on the G string. Up by 2 frets, and into the minor. And back down in the same place. back down by 2 frets, and I'm back in the Mixolydian. And you do have to watch out a little bit switching back and forth between these two scale shapes because they have some slight shifts within them. But if you learn each scale shape pretty well and focus on that finger combination, that should make it a little bit easier. And so combining all of these scale shapes together will map out an entire key all across the fretboard. And again, different keys will place different scale shapes in different places across the neck, but if you know all of them and how to combine them, you'll be able to play in any key anywhere. So give these 3 scale shapes a try and get going shifting back and forth. Next time around, we'll look at combining more than just 2 of them into some diagonal shapes across the fretboard. But in the meantime, happy practicing.